I'm Amber, 24. Yesterday, I discovered I'm worth almost $3 billion. The irony? I found out at my grandfather's funeral while surrounded by people who've treated me like furniture for most of my life. The air in St. Matthew's Cathedral smelled like wilted lilies and whispered resentment. Grandpa Bob's casket sat at the front, surrounded by flowers that cost more than my monthly rent. Nobody had volunteered for a eulogy. Not his own children. Not my cousins who'd spent Christmas mornings ripping open presents he'd bought. Nobody. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt invisible in your own family. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. 20 minutes of awkward silence stretched like taffy. People shuffled in their seats, checking phones, whispering about lunch plans. Nothing says loving family quite like 20 minutes of dead air at your benefactor's funeral. But hey, at least they showed up, probably checking their watches to see how long until the will reading. Here was a man who'd quietly funded their entire lives' college tuitions, house down payments, medical bills, and they couldn't summon the decency to say goodbye properly. I stood up. I'd like to say something. My mother's mortified expression could have curdled milk. Tyler rolled his eyes so hard I'm surprised they didn't fall out. Aunt Sandra actually whispered, "Oh God," loud enough for 3 rows to hear. Apparently showing basic human decency was embarrassing to them. My grandfather wasn't perfect, I began, my voice carrying across the cathedral. He was distant, reserved, but he showed up when it mattered. Every Christmas card I sent thanking him for his support got a handwritten response. He remembered my college graduation when half this room forgot. Dad shifted uncomfortably. Mom studied her manicured nails like they held the secrets of the universe. He paid for educations that launched careers, medical bills that saved lives, down payments that created homes. Yet somehow, the man who made all your comfortable lives possible dies alone, unmourned by the people who benefited most from his generosity. The silence was deafening. My cousin Jessica looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Michael stared at his shoes. Even the funeral director seemed impressed by the family's collective inability to show basic human decency. So thank you, Grandpa Bob, for your quiet kindness, your unexpected thoughtfulness, and for teaching me that showing up matters even when nobody else does. I sat down to absolute silence. Not one family member met my eyes. Funny how gratitude makes people so uncomfortable when they've forgotten what it means. After the burial, everyone clustered in groups, talking about anything except the man we'd just buried. I was helping Mom collect flowers when a distinguished man in a charcoal suit approached. "Miss Davis, I'm William Henderson, your grandfather's attorney. Might I speak with you privately?" My mother immediately perked up like a bloodhound catching a scent. "Oh, we can all hear whatever you need to discuss." Mr. Henderson's smile was politely firm. "Actually, Mrs. Davis, I need to speak with Amber alone." The family exchanged glances. Dad stepped forward with his professional voice. "As her father, I should—" "Miss Davis is 24. Mr. Henderson interrupted smoothly. "She doesn't require parental supervision for legal matters." He handed me a cream-colored envelope with my name written in Grandpa Bob's familiar script. "There's a formal reading next week, but your grandfather wanted you to have this tonight." Inside was a single sentence that would change everything. "Congratulations, sweetheart. You're now the sole heir to the Davis family fortune." My hands started shaking. Sole heir? That couldn't be right. I stared at the letter until the words blurred. Sole heir? Not major beneficiary or significant inheritance. Sole heir. Mr. Henderson watched my reaction with kind eyes. "There's more explanation in his personal letter, which I'll provide next week. For now, just know that your grandfather's decision was deliberate and final." "How much?" The question escaped before I could stop it. "Next week, Miss Davis. Everything will be clear next week." The family circled like vultures the moment Mr. Henderson left. Mom practically vibrated with curiosity. What did he want? What was in the envelope? I folded the letter carefully, buying time. Just some personal effects he wanted me to have. Dad's eyebrows shot up. Personal effects require a lawyer? You know how thorough Grandpa Bob was about paperwork, I said, which was true enough. Tyler snorted. Probably left you his stamp collection or something equally thrilling. If only he knew. Though to be fair, Tyler's idea of valuable collections probably maxed out at Pokemon cards. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept pulling out the letter, reading those impossible words. Sole heir. At 2 a.m., I called my best friend Charlotte. "Amber, it's the middle of the night. Are you okay?" "I think I'm rich," I whispered into the phone. "What? Did you win another scratch-off?" "No, my grandfather's will." I can't explain over the phone, but Charlotte, I think I'm really, really rich. A pause. "How rich are we talking?" New car rich or pay off student loans rich? I think we're talking never work again rich. The following week crawled by. I tried to act normal at my job at the marketing firm, but every phone buzz made me jump. Finally, the appointed day arrived. Mr. Henderson's law office occupied the entire 15th floor of downtown Minneapolis's most prestigious building. The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Mississippi River. I'd never been anywhere so obviously expensive. Your grandfather's estate is complex, Mr. Henderson began, spreading documents across the mahogany table. The transfer process will take several weeks to complete. He structured everything very carefully to expedite matters, but even streamlined, we're looking at 6 to 8 weeks for full asset transfer. Smart man, planning ahead. Though I suppose when you're worth billions, you have time to think these things through. The core message is simple. Robert Davis died worth $2.8 billion. I gripped the leather chair arms. Billion. With a B. The entirety of this estate, including the technology patents, real estate holdings, investment portfolios, and liquid assets, transfers to you. Miss Davis. But what about my parents? Tyler? My cousins? Mr. Henderson consulted his notes. Your grandfather established modest trust funds for your immediate family members years ago, $500,000 each. They've been receiving distributions for over a decade. My brain felt like scrambled eggs. They already got their inheritance? Indeed. These trusts were created when you were 16. Your grandfather wanted to ensure family members were provided for, but his primary wealth was always intended for you. He slid another envelope across the table. This explains his reasoning in his own words. Grandpa Bob's handwriting was shaky but clear. Dear Amber, if you're reading this, I'm finally free from watching my children and grandchildren treat kindness like weakness. You alone showed gratitude for what I provided. You alone remembered I existed beyond my bank account. The family received their share years ago, enough to live comfortably forever if managed wisely. They chose to spend rather than appreciate. You chose to acknowledge rather than assume. This fortune goes to someone who understands that money is a tool for good, not a birthright for the ungrateful. Use it wisely, sweetheart. Make them remember why character matters more than blood. Love, Grandpa Bob. Tears blurred my vision. He'd been watching, paying attention. All those Christmas cards I'd sent had mattered. I can arrange immediate access to operating funds, Mr. Henderson continued. Say, $100,000 to help with the transition period? I almost laughed. $100,000 as pocket money. This was definitely going to take some mental adjustment. A week later, I woke up to my phone buzzing with mobile banking alerts. $100,000 deposit. Available immediately. I stared at the screen until my eyes watered. You know what's funny about suddenly having money? You start noticing how obsessed everyone else is with not having it. At work, I found myself observing my coworkers differently. Jennifer complained about her husband's overtime hours. Mark stressed about his daughter's daycare costs. Sarah brought canned soup for lunch every day to save money. I could solve all their problems without touching 1% of my inheritance. The thought was overwhelming and slightly ridiculous. Thursday evening, Tyler called. Hey, want to grab drinks? I'm celebrating. Celebrating what? Got approved for another credit card. 20,000 limit. Ah yes, the classic Tyler celebration. Acquiring more debt. Some things never change. I met him at Murphy's Bar, our usual spot since college. Tyler ordered top-shelf whiskey, which should have been my first warning sign. So, he said after his second drink, Mom thinks you're hiding something. About what? The lawyer thing. She says you're acting weird. I sipped my beer, buying time. Weird how? Secretive. Distracted. She thinks maybe Grandpa Bob left you more than you're saying. My family's ability to sniff out money was supernatural. Why would I lie about that? Tyler studied my face. Because you know we'd expect you to share. There it was. The expectation that anything good in my life belonged to the family collective. When I got the marketing job, Mom immediately suggested I could help with Tyler's car payments. When I finally saved enough for a security deposit on my own apartment, Dad hinted that I should invest in family business opportunities instead. Hypothetically, I said carefully, what if Grandpa Bob had left me something significant? Tyler's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. How significant? Enough to change my life. Then you'd change all our lives, right? I mean, family sticks together. I finished my beer and left $20 on the table. I'll see you later, Tyler. The drive home gave me time to think. My family's reaction to my hypothetical windfall was exactly what I'd expected. They saw my inheritance as their inheritance, my good fortune as their opportunity. How refreshingly predictable. Friday morning, Charlotte texted, Emergency coffee session. I have news. We met at our usual cafe downtown. Charlotte looked grim. I ran into your cousin Jessica yesterday, she said without preamble. She asked some very interesting questions about your family situation. My stomach dropped. What kind of questions? Whether you'd seemed different lately. Whether you'd mentioned any financial changes. Whether I knew anything about your grandfather's will. What did you tell her? Nothing. But Amber, they're suspicious. Jessica mentioned that your Aunt Sandra hired someone to do background research. Great. My family had gone full detective mode. Background research on what? Property records. Business connections. Apparently, Sandra found some corporate filings that made her think your grandfather was worth more than anyone realized. Of course she did. Trust Sandra to turn grief into a research project. There's more, Charlotte continued. Jessica said they're planning a family dinner this weekend. To support Amber through her grief, were her exact words. A family dinner, with the whole clan, all focused on extracting information from me. I had a choice to make. Come clean about the inheritance and deal with the consequences, or keep lying and watch my family turn into Nancy Drew wannabes. Either way, my secret wasn't going to last much longer. But honestly, watching them scramble for clues was almost entertaining enough to keep the charade going a little longer. The family dinner was scheduled for Sunday at Aunt Sandra's house. The invitation came via group text Saturday morning, which gave me approximately 36 hours to decide how much truth I was ready to reveal. I spent Saturday afternoon with Mr. Henderson's team, signing preliminary documents and learning about my new reality. The conference room felt like a war room, with lawyers, financial advisors, and accountants explaining everything from tax implications to security considerations. Discretion is crucial during the transition period, emphasized Margaret Chen, the head of wealth management. New billionaires often become targets for everything from investment scams to kidnapping attempts. Kidnapping. That hadn't occurred to me. Apparently, being rich came with a whole new set of problems I'd never considered. We recommend maintaining your current lifestyle for now, she continued. Sudden changes in spending or living arrangements can attract unwanted attention. So I'd keep my tiny apartment and my cubicle job while secretly controlling enough money to buy small countries. The absurdity was staggering. Saturday evening, Charlotte came over with wine and moral support. We sat on my secondhand couch, eating takeout Chinese food while I tried to process my new reality. What are you going to tell them tomorrow? She asked. I have no idea. If I tell the truth, they'll never leave me alone. If I keep lying, they'll figure it out eventually anyway. There's a third option, Charlotte said carefully, which is partial truth. Tell them Grandpa Bob left you enough to be comfortable. Not billionaire comfortable, but enough that you don't have to worry about money anymore. It wasn't a bad strategy. Give them something substantial enough to satisfy their curiosity, but not so enormous they'd lose their minds. Sunday arrived gray and drizzly, matching my mood perfectly. I drove to Aunt Sandra's house in Edina, where the family was already assembled. The smell of Sandra's famous lasagna filled the air, and the dining room table was set with her good china. The effort was touching if you ignored the obvious ulterior motives. Nothing says, "we love you," like breaking out the fancy plates when you want something. Amber, sweetie, Sandra hugged me tight. How are you holding up? We've all been so worried. Tyler was already positioned strategically near the wine, while my cousins Jessica and Michael flanked the appetizer table like sentries. Mom and Dad sat together on the sofa, projecting concerned parent energy. I'm fine, I said, accepting a glass of wine. Just processing everything. Of course, Sandra said sympathetically. Losing a grandparent is never easy, even when you weren't particularly close. The qualifier stung. None of them had been close to Grandpa Bob, but somehow my grief was less valid because I'd actually bothered to maintain contact with him. We made small talk through appetizers and salad. Work updates, weather complaints, gossip about neighbors. Normal family dinner conversation if you ignored the undercurrent of anticipation humming like electrical wires. Then Sandra cleared her throat. Amber, honey, we've been wondering about your grandfather's arrangements. Here we go. What do you mean? Well, Dad jumped in. He was obviously quite successful. We're just curious about how he chose to distribute things. Michael leaned forward. Sandra hired someone to look into public records. Grandpa Bob owned more property than we realized. I met his eyes steadily. What kind of research? Just basic property searches, Sandra said quickly. Nothing invasive. Just curious about family history. Lies. They'd been digging for financial information, not genealogy. Though I had to admire the commitment to pretending this was about family bonding. The lawyer mentioned that Grandpa Bob was very thorough. About his planning, I said carefully. Thorough how? Jessica asked immediately. I took a sip of wine, buying time. He set up provisions for everyone years ago. Made sure the family was taken care of. That was true enough. But what about the main estate? Tyler pressed. I mean, someone has to inherit the bulk of everything. The room went silent. 8 pairs of eyes focused on me with laser intensity. Time for a decision. Actually, I said slowly, there's something I should probably tell you all. The silence in Sandra's dining room was deafening. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, the hum of the refrigerator, Tyler's slightly anxious breathing. You could practically hear their calculators running. It was like watching sharks smell blood in the water. Grandpa Bob did leave me something significant, I began, watching their faces carefully. More than I initially mentioned. Sandra's grip tightened on her wineglass. How significant? Enough that I won't have to worry about money for a while. Define a while, Tyler said immediately. I'd rehearsed this moment with Charlotte, but facing my family's hungry expressions made my prepared words feel inadequate. Enough to pay off my student loans, quit my job if I wanted to, maybe buy a house. Dad's eyebrows shot up. Are we talking hundreds of thousands? Something like that, which was technically true if you considered something like that to mean thousands of times more than hundreds of thousands. But hey, I wasn't technically lying. The reaction was immediate and predictable. Jessica's face fell with disappointment. Michael looked calculating. Tyler appeared to be doing mental math. Mom and Dad exchanged a glance that clearly communicated, not as much as we hoped, but still substantial. That's wonderful. Honey, Mom said with forced enthusiasm. Very generous of him. So, like, how much exactly? Tyler asked. I mean, ballpark. I met his eyes steadily. Enough. Aunt Sandra leaned forward. Amber, sweetheart. I hope you're being smart about this. A windfall can disappear quickly without proper planning. Because Sandra was obviously the expert on financial management. This from the woman who'd blown through her own divorce settlement in 3 years. I'm working with financial advisors. Which firm? Dad asked immediately. Of course he'd want details. Dad worked in insurance and considered himself a financial expert despite having blown through his own inheritance in record time. Henderson and Associates, I said, which was true. Mr. Henderson's law firm handled wealthy clients exclusively. Never heard of them, Sandra mused. Are they local? Downtown Minneapolis. Jessica cleared her throat. Well, I think it's amazing that Grandpa Bob remembered you specifically. I mean, none of us really expected anything additional. Liar. They'd all expected something. They just hadn't expected me to be the primary beneficiary. Family should celebrate each other's good fortune, Mom added, though her smile looked painted on. We finished dinner with forced cheerfulness and stilted conversation. Everyone was processing the new information, recalibrating their expectations, and probably planning their next moves. As we prepared to leave, Tyler pulled me aside. Hey, I'm really happy for you, he said, though his expression suggested otherwise. But you know, if you ever want to invest in something together, I've got some ideas. What kind of ideas? Business opportunities, real estate, family stuff. There it was. The assumption that my windfall should benefit the collective family welfare, because God forbid I actually keep something for myself. I'll keep that in mind, I said diplomatically. The drive home gave me time to reflect. I'd bought myself some breathing room with the partial truth, but I hadn't solved the fundamental problem. My family saw my inheritance as their opportunity, regardless of the actual amount. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. So proud of you, cuz. Can't wait to hear about your plans. Then Michael. Congrats on the inheritance. Maybe we can grab coffee and talk about investment strategies. Finally, Tyler. Seriously, though, let's discuss some partnership opportunities soon. I turned off my phone and drove through the quiet Minneapolis streets. Tomorrow I'd have to figure out how to navigate my new reality while managing family expectations that were already spiraling beyond reason. The truth was, I had enough money to solve every financial problem my family had ever had. But Grandpa Bob's letter echoed in my mind. They'd already received their share and chosen to waste rather than appreciate it. Maybe it was time for them to learn the difference between earning support and expecting it. But first, I had to decide whether I was ready for the war that honesty would inevitably bring. Monday morning brought 3 missed calls from Mom, 2 texts from Tyler about time-sensitive opportunities, and an email from Jessica with the subject line, Family Investment Club Ideas. The vultures were circling, and apparently they'd formed a committee. At work, I sat in my cubicle pretending to care about marketing campaigns while my phone buzzed constantly. The disconnect was becoming unbearable. Here I was, worth billions, listening to my boss explain why we couldn't afford better coffee in the break room. By lunch, I'd made a decision. I called Mr. Henderson. I need to speed up the timeline, I told him. My family is getting suspicious, and I can't keep living this double life. What are you thinking? I want to quit my job. Start the transition. If they're going to find out anyway, I'd rather control the narrative. Miss Davis, are you certain? Once this information becomes public, there's no going back. I looked around the office at my coworkers discussing their weekend plans, their mortgage payments, their kids' college funds, normal people with normal problems that money couldn't entirely solve. I'm certain. That afternoon, I walked into my boss's office and resigned. No 2 weeks' notice, no explanation beyond pursuing other opportunities. The look of confusion on his face was almost worth the awkwardness. I spent Tuesday apartment hunting. Not for mansions or penthouses, I wasn't ready for that level of attention yet. But my studio apartment with the broken air conditioning and neighbors who practiced drums at 2 a.m. suddenly felt unnecessary. I found a beautiful 2-bedroom condo overlooking Lake Minnetonka. Hardwood floors, granite countertops, a view that could calm anyone's anxiety. The rent was more than my previous annual salary. I signed the lease and paid 6 months up front without blinking, because apparently that's just what billionaires do on Tuesday afternoons. Wednesday evening, Charlotte came over to help me pack. We sat surrounded by cardboard boxes, eating pizza and drinking wine from coffee mugs because I'd already packed the real glasses. Are you sure about this pace? She asked. Maybe you should ease into the wealthy lifestyle instead of diving in head first. Charlotte, I've been poor my entire life. I've eaten ramen for dinner, stressed about electric bills, worn shoes with holes because I couldn't afford new ones. I'm done pretending scarcity when I have abundance. My phone rang. Tyler. Amber, Mom says you quit your job. What the hell? I decided to take some time to figure out my next steps. With what money? I thought you said the inheritance was just enough to pay off loans and maybe buy a house. Here we go. I'm managing fine, Tyler. Are you managing fine, or are you lying about how much Grandpa Bob actually left you? The accusation hung in the air like smoke. I'd known this moment would come, but hearing the suspicion in his voice still stung. What exactly are you implying? I'm implying that normal people don't quit their jobs and start apartment hunting in Minnetonka unless they've got serious money backing them up. Charlotte was watching me with wide eyes. I put Tyler on speaker. Maybe I'm just better at financial planning than you are, I said evenly. Bullshit, Amber. Jessica saw you at that real estate office. Mom drove by your new building. That's not pay off student loans money. That's I'm rich money. They'd been following me, watching me, monitoring my movements like private investigators. You know your family truly loves you when they start treating you like a criminal mastermind. I have to go, Tyler. Don't hang up on me. We need to talk about this as a family. No, we don't. I disconnected the call and immediately turned off my phone. Jesus, Charlotte breathed. They're actually stalking you. Apparently. And here I thought sending Christmas cards made me manipulative. Turns out just existing with money is the real crime. What are you going to do? I looked around my half-packed apartment, thinking about the life I was leaving behind and the one I was stepping into. I'm going to tell them the truth. All of it. Are you ready for that war? I met her eyes. I think the war already started. I just haven't been fighting back yet. Have you ever experienced something similar with your family? Let me know in the comments below. I called a family meeting for Saturday afternoon. Neutral territory, the community center where we'd held Tyler's graduation party. I wanted space, witnesses, and multiple exit routes. Friday night, I barely slept. I'd spent the day with Mr. Henderson's team preparing for what he called wealth disclosure management. Apparently, there were protocols for revealing massive fortunes to potentially hostile family members. Because that's a normal thing people need protocols for. Remember, Margaret Chen had advised, you control the narrative. Don't let them make you feel guilty for your grandfather's choices. Easy for her to say. She'd never faced the Davis family in full entitlement mode. Saturday arrived bright and crisp, one of those perfect October days that made Minneapolis feel like a postcard. I drove to the community center in my same old Honda Civic, knowing it might be one of the last times I'd need to worry about things like gas prices or parking meters. The family was already assembled when I arrived. Mom and Dad sat together, presenting a united front. Tyler paced near the windows, too agitated to sit still. Sandra had positioned herself at the head of the table like she was chairing a board meeting. Jessica and Michael flanked her, completing the intimidation formation. Nothing says loving family intervention quite like military-style positioning around a conference table. Amber, Mom said as I entered, we need to discuss your recent behavior. My behavior? The secrecy. Dad jumped in. The sudden lifestyle changes. The evasive answers about your inheritance. I sat down across from them, my prepared speech suddenly feeling inadequate. These people had known me my entire life. They could read my tells, predict my reactions, exploit my weaknesses, but they'd underestimated how much Grandpa Bob's letter had changed me. "You're right," I said simply. "I haven't been entirely honest about the inheritance." The room went silent. Sandra leaned forward like a predator sensing wounded prey. "Go on," she prompted. "Grandpa Bob left me more than I initially said." "How much more?" Tyler demanded. I met his eyes steadily. "All of it." Confusion flickered across their faces. "All of what?" Jessica asked. "Everything. The entire estate. I'm his sole heir." The silence stretched for 10 seconds. 20. Then Tyler laughed. "Come on, Amber. Be serious." "I am serious." Mom shook her head. "Honey, that's impossible. Family estates don't work that way. There are laws, obligations. There are also wills," I interrupted. And Grandpa Bob's will was very specific. Dad's expression shifted from confusion to calculation. "Amber, if what you're saying is true, we're talking about significant money. We're talking about $2.8 billion. The words hit the room like a physical force. Jessica gasped. Michael's mouth fell open. Sandra went completely still, her face cycling through disbelief, rage, and desperate hope. Tyler was the first to recover. That's not possible. It's completely possible, and completely true. But what about us?" Mom's voice cracked. "What about the family?" Here it was. The question I'd been dreading. "You received your inheritances years ago. $500,000 each. Distributed through trust funds." Sandra's face went white. "We what?" "Grandpa Bob established trust funds for everyone when I was 16. You've all been receiving distributions for 8 years. The math was sinking in. They'd received their share and blown through it without even realizing it was their inheritance. Talk about failing to read the fine print of your own financial life. That money was supposed to last," Dad said weakly. "It was supposed to last forever if managed properly," I agreed. "But you treated it like found money instead of acknowledging what it was." "So that's it?" Tyler's voice rose. "You get billions and we get nothing else? You get exactly what Grandpa Bob intended you to get, which was more than most people receive from their family members." Jessica found her voice. "Amber, you can't seriously plan to keep all that money to yourself. Watch me. What do you think will happen next?" Drop your predictions in the comments below. The community center meeting ended with Tyler storming out, Jessica crying, and Sandra threatening legal action she couldn't afford. Mom and Dad sat in stunned silence while Michael stared at his hands like they held answers to life's biggest questions. I drove home to my new condo feeling simultaneously liberated and exhausted. The truth was finally out, but the war was just beginning. Sunday morning brought the first casualty. A Facebook post from Jessica, tagged with the entire extended family. Some people forget where they come from when they get lucky. Family means supporting each other, not hoarding blessings. Praying for my cousin to remember what really matters. The passive-aggressive social media campaign had begun, because nothing says mature adult conversation like vague posting about family drama on Facebook. Tyler's approach was more direct. He showed up at my condo Monday evening looking haggard and desperate. "Amber, we need to talk." I almost didn't let him in, but something in his expression made me open the door. He walked into my new living room, taking in the expensive furniture and lake view with obvious resentment. "Nice place," he said bitterly. "Thank you. Look, I get it. You're angry about how we've treated you over the years. But this vindictive thing isn't you." "Vindictive?" I kept my voice level. "Tyler, I'm following Grandpa Bob's explicit wishes. That's not vindictive. It's respectful." "Bullshit. He was 95 and probably not thinking clearly. No rational person leaves billions to one grandkid while cutting out everyone else." "Ah, yes. The classic, he was too old to know what he was doing, argument. Because apparently being elderly automatically makes you incompetent, but being broke makes you an expert on inheritance law. He was thinking perfectly clearly, clear enough to document every financial gift he'd given this family over the past decade." Tyler's face flushed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means he kept records, Tyler. Every time he bailed you out of credit card debt, every time he covered Mom and Dad's mortgage payments, every time he funded Sandra's business ventures, he knew exactly where his money went and how little appreciation he received. We were grateful. Were you? When's the last time any of you called him just to talk? When's the last time anyone visited without needing something? Tyler couldn't answer because we both knew the truth. I'd been the only family member who maintained contact with Grandpa Bob without expecting financial gain. "This isn't about gratitude," Tyler said finally. "This is about you punishing us for not treating you like you were special." The accusation stung because part of it was true. I had felt invisible in my family for most of my life. But this inheritance wasn't about revenge, it was about recognition. "I'm not punishing anyone," I said quietly. "I'm simply not rewarding poor behavior." "So what? You're going to cut us off completely? Pretend we don't exist? I'm going to live my life according to my values instead of your expectations." He left angry, slamming my door hard enough to rattle the windows. Some things never change. Tyler's still a 5-year-old when he doesn't get his way. Tuesday brought a visit from Mom and Dad. They appeared at my building's lobby, and the security guard called up to announce them. I debated refusing the meeting, but hiding wouldn't solve anything. They looked smaller in the marble lobby of my new building. Older. Dad wore his best suit, the one reserved for funerals and job interviews. Mom clutched her purse like a shield. "We need to understand," Mom said without preamble once we were seated in my living room. "Help us understand why your grandfather would do this." I showed them a copy of his letter. They read it together, Dad's lips moving slightly as he processed the words. "He thought we were ungrateful," Mom said finally. "You were ungrateful." Dad looked up sharply. "That's not fair, Amber. We appreciated everything he did." "Did you? Or did you just accept it as your due?" The silence stretched uncomfortably. "We made mistakes," Mom admitted. "But we're family. Families forgive each other. Families also respect each other's choices, even when those choices are inconvenient." "So you're really not going to share any of this?" Dad asked. I looked at my parents, two people I'd spent my entire life trying to please, and felt something shift inside me. "I might," I said slowly. "But not because you expect it. And not until you understand the difference between earning support and demanding it." They left confused and frustrated, which was exactly how I felt most days. The inheritance was mine. The choice of how to use it was mine. But the weight of those decisions was heavier than I'd ever imagined. 3 weeks after my revelation, the family's desperation reached a new level. I discovered this when Mr. Henderson called me into his office with a grave expression. "Miss Davis, we have a problem." He slid a thick folder across his desk. Inside were legal documents, private investigator reports, and what appeared to be a formal challenge to Grandpa Bob's will. "Your family has retained counsel," he explained. "They're claiming undue influence and questioning your grandfather's mental capacity." My stomach dropped. Can they do that? They can try. However, their case is exceptionally weak. Your grandfather underwent comprehensive psychological evaluation just 6 months before his death as part of his estate planning process. He was declared mentally competent by 3 independent physicians. I flipped through the papers, seeing my family's desperation laid out in legal terminology. Accusations that I'd manipulated a lonely old man. Claims that the inheritance amount was evidence of compromised judgment. Demands for full financial disclosure and asset freezing pending investigation. Because apparently leaving money to the one family member who actually cared about you is evidence of mental incompetence. The logic is flawless. "There's more," Mr. Henderson said grimly. "They've hired a private investigator to research your relationship with your grandfather. They're looking for evidence of fraud or coercion. They're investigating me? Thoroughly. Phone records, email exchanges, financial transactions, even interviews with your neighbors and former coworkers." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. My own family was treating me like a criminal. How long can this drag on? Months, potentially. The good news is that probate proceedings for estates this size typically take 8 to 12 months anyway. So their challenge doesn't significantly delay things. He pulled out another document. "We've discovered why they're so desperate." The paper was a credit report. Tyler's credit report. "Your brother owes nearly $200,000 across multiple credit cards, personal loans, and gambling debts. Your cousin Michael is facing foreclosure. Your Aunt Sandra's business is 3 months behind on commercial rent." The picture became clear. They weren't just greedy, they were drowning financially and saw my inheritance as their only lifeline. "They were counting on this money," I said slowly. "It appears so. They assumed your grandfather would distribute his wealth traditionally, providing them with enough to solve their financial crises. That evening, I sat in my condo watching the sunset over Lake Minnetonka, trying to process the magnitude of my family's betrayal. They weren't just contesting the will, they were systematically trying to destroy my character to claim money that had never been theirs. My phone rang. "Charlotte, have you seen the news?" she asked without preamble. "What news?" "Channel 7. Turn it on now." I grabbed the remote and flipped to the local news station. The anchor was mid-sentence. Family dispute over a substantial inheritance has raised questions about elder abuse and family dynamics. My photo appeared on screen. Not a recent one, they'd somehow obtained my college graduation picture. The deceased, Robert Davis, was a local businessman whose estate has become the subject of family litigation. His granddaughter, 24-year-old Amber Davis, reportedly inherited significant assets, leaving other family members disputing the arrangement. They'd gone public. My family had actually leaked our private business to the media, though apparently they'd been careful not to reveal specific dollar amounts or will details, probably on advice from their lawyer. The report continued with quotes from family sources expressing concern about my grandfather's isolation and my sudden closeness to him before his death. They painted me as a gold-digging opportunist who'd preyed on a vulnerable elderly man. My phone started ringing constantly. Reporters, distant relatives, even college acquaintances who'd somehow gotten my number. I turned off the phone and poured a large glass of wine. The war had escalated beyond anything I'd imagined. My family wasn't just fighting for money, they were fighting to destroy my reputation in the process. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated how much documentation Grandpa Bob had left behind. And tomorrow, they were going to learn just how thorough a brilliant billionaire could be when protecting his chosen heir. The next morning, Mr. Henderson called an emergency meeting. When I arrived at his office, I found not just him, but an entire team of attorneys, investigators, and media specialists. "Miss Davis," he said gravely, "it's time to fight back." They'd spent the night compiling what they called the nuclear option, a comprehensive defense that would not only protect my inheritance, but expose my family's true motivations. "Your grandfather," Mr. Henderson explained, anticipated this exact scenario. He activated a large monitor showing a timeline of financial transactions. For the past 8 years, Robert Davis meticulously documented every interaction with your family members: phone calls, visits, financial requests, and responses. The evidence was damning. Records showed Tyler had contacted Grandpa Bob 17 times in 2 years, 16 requests for money, 1 thank you call. Sandra had borrowed over $300,000 for her business ventures, promising repayment that never materialized. My parents had received mortgage assistance, car payments, and medical bill coverage while complaining about his interference in family matters. And here, Mr. Henderson highlighted several entries, are records of your interactions. My pattern was completely different. Regular calls on holidays and birthdays, thank you cards for every gift, updates about my life that didn't involve requests for money. I'd actually maintained a relationship with my grandfather, while everyone else had maintained a transaction. Apparently, basic human decency really does stand out when you document it properly. The media narrative your family created is about to backfire spectacularly, Margaret Chen added with satisfaction. That afternoon, we held our own press conference. Mr. Henderson stood at a podium in his firm's conference room, facing cameras from every major Minneapolis news outlet. "We are here today to address the false and defamatory claims made against Miss Amber Davis regarding her inheritance from Robert Davis." He methodically dismantled every accusation. Grandpa Bob's mental competency evaluations, documentation of his deliberate estate planning process, evidence of his family's financial dependency and lack of genuine relationship. Then came the bombshell. Mr. Davis left behind audio recordings explaining his decision. The room went silent as my grandfather's voice filled the air through the conference room speakers. "I am Robert Davis, speaking on June 15, 2025, of sound mind and clear intention. If you are hearing this recording, it means my family has challenged my will and forced this evidence into public view." His voice was strong, unmistakably lucid. "I have watched my children and grandchildren treat my financial support as an entitlement rather than a gift. They have shown no interest in my well-being, my thoughts, or my life beyond my bank account. With one exception." He detailed years of disappointment with his family's behavior, contrasted with specific examples of my different approach. "Amber alone has shown genuine care for me as a person, rather than a resource. She has earned this inheritance through character, not blood relation. I leave my fortune to someone who understands its responsibility." The recording continued for 20 minutes, methodically explaining his reasoning and anticipating every argument his family might make. When it ended, the reporters erupted with questions. "Miss Davis," one called out, "how do you respond to your family's accusations?" I stepped to the microphone, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I'm heartbroken that grief has led my family to these desperate measures. But I will not apologize for honoring my grandfather's wishes or for maintaining the only genuine relationship anyone in my family had with him. What will you do with the inheritance? I will use it responsibly and thoughtfully, as my grandfather intended. That includes charitable giving, responsible investing, and yes, supporting family members who demonstrate they've learned from this experience. The press conference made national news. The narrative shifted overnight from suspicious inheritance to family greed exposed. But the real victory came that evening when Tyler called. Amber, his voice was broken, defeated. We need to talk. I'm listening. We're dropping the will contest. I wasn't surprised. Their legal case had been weak from the beginning, and the media attention had made them look desperate rather than sympathetic. Good. But can we? He couldn't bring himself to ask directly, but I understood. They were drowning financially and had nowhere else to turn. Tyler, I said gently, I'm willing to help family members who acknowledge their mistakes and demonstrate genuine change, but I'm done being taken for granted. What does that mean? It means if you want my support, you'll earn it through changed behavior, not family obligation. The old Amber would have immediately written checks to solve everyone's problems. The new Amber, the one who'd inherited my grandfather's wisdom along with his wealth, understood the difference between helping and enabling. 6 months later, I sat in the conference room of the Amber Davis Foundation, reviewing grant applications from organizations supporting financial literacy education. The irony wasn't lost on me using my inheritance to help people manage money responsibly, because apparently, the universe has a sense of humor about these things. The foundation had become my primary focus, but it wasn't my only project. I'd quietly paid off Tyler's gambling debts after he completed a treatment program and demonstrated 6 months of financial responsibility. Jessica received funding for her teaching certification after she apologized publicly for her social media campaign. Michael kept his house after agreeing to financial counseling and a structured repayment plan. Turns out people can change when the consequences become real enough. Who would have thought? My parents were the holdouts. They'd attended 2 family therapy sessions before deciding they were too old to change. Their choice? I realized. I could control my responses to their behavior, but I couldn't control the behavior itself. Miss Davis? My assistant's voice brought me back to the present. Your 2 p.m. appointment is here. Charlotte walked in carrying coffee and her usual bright smile. Despite my changed circumstances, she remained exactly the same, which I treasured more than any amount of money. How's the Billionaire business today? She asked, settling into the chair across from my desk. Complicated, I admitted. Did you see the Times article about inherited wealth and family relationships? The one that mentioned you? Very favorably, I might add. The article had been part of a series about wealth transfer and generational responsibility. They'd interviewed me about the challenges of inheriting significant money and managing family expectations. I keep thinking about what Grandpa Bob said in his letter, I told Charlotte, about character mattering more than blood. Do you regret anything? The way you handled the family situation? I considered the question seriously. I regret that it was necessary, but I don't regret standing up for his wishes or refusing to enable their poor choices. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. Dinner Sunday? I'm cooking. Want to show you my budget spreadsheet. The old Tyler would never have mentioned budgets voluntarily. Progress was possible, apparently, when consequences were real. Are you happy? Charlotte asked, watching me respond to Tyler's text. I'm learning to be, I said honestly. The money solved my financial worries, but it created other challenges I never anticipated, such as trust issues. Everyone wants something now. Dating is nightmare. Men either expect me to pay for everything or they're intimidated by the wealth disparity. I can't tell if people like me or my bank account. You'll figure it out, Charlotte said confidently. You're still the same person who sent Christmas cards to a grumpy old billionaire because it was the right thing to do. That evening, I drove to the cemetery where Grandpa Bob was buried. His headstone was simple. Robert Davis, 1930-2025, character above all. I'd had those words added after reading his personal papers. They'd been his life motto, written on a card he kept in his wallet for 40 years. I hope I'm doing this right, I said to the granite marker. The foundation is growing. The family is slowly learning. I'm trying to use your gift wisely. A breeze rustled the oak trees overhead, carrying the scent of autumn leaves and new possibilities. Standing in the peaceful cemetery as sunset painted the sky orange and gold, I finally understood the full weight of Grandpa Bob's gift. He hadn't just left me his fortune, he'd trusted me to carry forward his values. And honestly, that was both more terrifying and more meaningful than the money itself. The truth was, inheriting billions had taught me that money was just a tool. How you used it revealed your character. My grandfather had understood that, which was why he'd chosen me not as his blood relative, but as his moral heir. 3 months later, I received an unexpected visitor. Mom appeared at my foundation office, looking nervous and smaller than I remembered. "I've been thinking," she said without preamble, "about what you said, about earning support versus expecting it." I gestured for her to sit. "And? I want to try again. The therapy sessions. Understanding why we treated you the way we did." It was a start. Not a guarantee, not an apology that fixed everything, but a genuine acknowledgement that change was possible. "I'd like that," I said simply. Over the following year, some relationships healed while others remained distant. Tyler genuinely turned his life around, becoming someone I actually enjoyed spending time with. Jessica and Michael found their footing with my conditional support. Sandra remained bitter and distant, unable to accept that her financial problems weren't my responsibility to solve. Mom and Dad made real progress in therapy, slowly learning to see me as an independent adult, rather than an extension of their expectations. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. The foundation grew beyond my wildest expectations. We'd funded over 100 scholarships, supported dozens of financial literacy programs, and helped countless families learn to manage money responsibly. I still lived simply the same condo, the same values, just with better security and a financial advisor who occasionally prevented me from giving away everything I owned. Because apparently, even billionaire philanthropy requires some strategic thinking. For the first time since this whole journey began, I felt truly worthy of Grandpa Bob's trust. Not because I'd used the money perfectly, I'd made plenty of mistakes, but because I'd honored the spirit of his gift. I learned that the biggest inheritance isn't money. It's the wisdom to use whatever you have, whether it's $1 or $1 billion, in ways that reflect your values rather than your fears. Some stories end with revenge. Others end with reconciliation. Mine ended with something more valuable: the quiet satisfaction of knowing I'd honored both my grandfather's memory and my own integrity. That, I realized, was worth more than all the money in the world. But having both didn't hurt either. And having enough to share with people who genuinely earned it, that felt like the real victory. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more tales of family, money, and the courage to stand up for what's right. Sometimes the biggest inheritance isn't money, it's the strength to use it wisely. And sometimes, just sometimes, standing up for yourself teaches everyone around you how they should have been treating you all along.